So now that you have spent some time learning more about text discussions and the genre of nonfiction, you are going to combine those two for your one class assignment this week. So, what you are going to do is first choose a nonfiction piece in your area. So, for example, if you are a music major, you're going to choose something related to music, maybe a book about a composer. If you are in the area of science, you're going to choose some type of nonfiction about something related to science, math, and so on. So, whatever major you are in, your first step is to choose a piece that is nonfiction that you are going to create an interactive read aloud around. So you can use one that you have, you can go to the UND library, the public library, talk to a professor in your area, but that's your first step. And if you have a question about using a nonfiction piece that you'd like to run past me, you can shoot me an email and I'd be happy to respond to you. But once you have chosen that piece, you need to decide, are you going to read the entire thing? If it's a chapter book, you'll probably only want to do it around one or two chapters. If it's a textbook, maybe around one day. But if you were going to teach this in one class period, and so, for example, when I was a fifth grade teacher, a lot of times I would use picture books, and so I would do the entire interactive read aloud plan around that whole picture book because my plan would be to read that entire thing in one day. But of course, if what you choose is longer, you're probably not going to read that whole thing. So, whatever you plan to do as if you were teaching it in a day, that is what you will use for your interactive read aloud assignment. So once you have chosen your text, the next thing is to look through that part or that entire thing and decide where, if you were to read this to a class, you would stop and have discussions about what you are reading. Um, Actually, my dissertation was on this topic. So the population that I studied was related to reading motivation and reading achievement. And the results showed that being able to have discussions with classmates and also with the teacher, and also being able to see that the teacher is involved in the reading process too, increases students' motivation to read, but also their academic achievement in this area. So, this is an important thing to do. So, what you are again going to do is just think about before you were, as if you were planning ahead of time a lesson. So, before you were to bring this to a class, think about, read through, and plan some different places that you would stop and have these important discussions. So, they could be questions, they could be prompts, they could be things, for the kids to think about related to the topic. But the really important thing is to do this ahead of time. So the idea of an interactive read aloud and having discussions in this way is pre-planning your discussions. They don't always have to take place exactly how you plan, but having it planned out ensures that you are going to cover, the discussions that you have in mind. So you can see on the rubric in this folder, I want you to first pick your reading piece and go ahead and tell me what that is. And then I want you to think about, if you were reading this piece to a class, what are 4 different things that you would ask the class before you even start reading this piece. So this is just to get the students thinking, get the students talking about the topic. So you'll need 4 different questions before you even start reading this piece. And then once you start reading this piece, you are going to need to think of places that you want to stop and have discussion. So you'll include the page number of where you plan to stop and what you plan to say. And I can't remember how many, you'll have to look at the rubric, but I stated how many I expect to have as far as they're called during reading questions. And then after, so once you are finished reading this to your class, I also want you to think of 4 different discussion questions slash prompts you could talk to your class about related to this piece. So you want to think of before reading questions slash prompts, the during reading, and then the after reading. And so that's your interactive read aloud. So a lot of times when I came to my 5th grade class with this idea, I would have sticky notes on the front of the book related to what I planned to say before I started reading. I would have sticky notes in the book, so when I got to that page, I would remind myself what I wanted to stop and say and talk about with the class. And then again, on the back of the book, I would have sticky notes related to what I wanted to say after. So that whole thing kind of comes together as a great big and powerful discussion with the class. So you can see the rubric of what I expect to see. I want to see your questions typed out in a Word document. And then I also want to see in the during reading part exactly, the page numbers that you plan to stop at and ask related to, whatever's happening on that part. So if you have any questions related to that, again, feel free to email me, but just choose a piece. Think about questions you would ask the class before, during, and after. Write those down in a Word document, and then that's what you will submit by the end of the week. In this folder, I have an example of the interactive read aloud I did on a picture book. So you can go ahead and look at that as an example when creating your own. I also put an example of how that would look in a lesson plan. You do not need to make this into a lesson plan. You don't even have to open that second piece if you don't want to. But if you're interested to see how that all plays together in a lesson plan, you can go ahead and take a look. But really just focus on the first example and then creating your own. So I'm excited to see what you choose. I'm excited to see your questions. Really, last thing, try to focus on these higher order thinking skills. Ask questions that you really want to get great discussions out of. So obviously you're not going to want to ask, too many like surface level questions because you're probably not going to get a lot out of that discussion. So really take some time to think about what do I want to get out of, this interactive read aloud with the class, and then base your discussion, questions, and prompts around that. I hope that wasn't too much information. I hope that I explained this okay, but if you have any questions along the way while you are creating your own interactive read aloud, please feel free to reach out. I look forward to seeing them at the end of this week.